After our volunteer mission to Israel this summer, Cheryl and Abigail and I stayed in Yerushalayim for a few days, doing some more volunteer work and spending time in our favorite city. One afternoon, by the way, I just want to give you, because if you got spielkes like I do, I should have you out of here by 1:15, okay? So one afternoon, as we walked to our hotel down a gentle hill on Betzalel Street, we noticed in the distance an old woman trekking up the hill, and she was pushing a utility cart filled to the brim with groceries. She stopped at a gate, she put a key in the lock and opened it, and then she stood there, looking up and down the hill, seemingly waiting for someone, perhaps a husband or a special friend, but no one arrived, and she kept waiting. As we crossed the street onto her block, a young couple, a man and a woman in their early 20s, approached the old woman. Though we couldn't hear their conversation, we watched as the younger woman helped the older woman through the gate and up a steep flight of stairs to a small door. The man followed, carrying the utility cart, and the old woman opened the door to what must have been her home. She nodded to the young couple, probably thanking them. No hugs or kisses, and she closed the door. The couple walked down the stairs and continued up the hill, passing us, engrossed in a lively conversation about their evening plans. Clearly, they did not know the old woman. They had just done a mitzvah. No big deal. As we passed the old woman's gate, we noticed a pretty tile hanging next to it containing her house number. And we stopped in our tracks as the three of us read the number, 613. The old woman lived at 613 Betzalel Street. Now, for those of you who don't know, 613 is a powerful Jewish number. The Torah, we're taught, contains 613 mitzvot, actions we must fulfill to heal the world. During the high holidays, except for today, we eat pomegranates, which according to tradition contain 613 seeds. And in doing so, we symbolically fill ourselves with all the mitzvot in the Torah as we step into the new year. In the future, Moshiach will come. Moshiach is the Jewish Messiah. Yes, Jews believe in a Messiah, one that will come and perfect the world, empowering us all to embrace each of the 613 mitzvot. With the arrival of Moshiach, we won't need to eat a pomegranate. Instinctively, we'll act in a way that heals the world. The great Jewish medieval scholar Maimonides, he taught us that we don't have to wait for Moshiach to heal the world. He insists that doing just one mitzvah, such as helping an elderly lady with her groceries, can help tip the scales, bringing the world closer to redemption. Now, as we watch the scales tip in the favor of humanity at 613 Betzalel Street, I couldn't help but wonder if the old woman was doing more than waiting. Was she perhaps watching, testing her environment, and finally noting with pleasure that two young people were tipping the scales in the right direction? In the Torah, we read how the high priest performed rituals to tip the scales in the right direction on the first Yom Kippur. This Yom Kippur, through repentance and prayer and righteous behavior, we reconnect with our ability to influence the balance of our lives. Every Yom Kippur, we're reminded that we can change the world through individual and communal efforts to restore equilibrium. This rebalancing is something we hope for and through our own actions can actually achieve every year. But we don't have to wait for Yom Kippur to rebalance. The young couple didn't. On their way to a fun night out, they didn't hesitate the old woman to help her. Their actions certainly lifted her spirits, while also, even if they weren't aware of it, lifted their own spirits. And on a deeper level, their actions elevated the overall well-being of their community, beautifully tipping the scales for everyone. On each of my 3 trips to Israel since October 7th, I felt different emotions coming from Israelis. In November, just a month after the attack, I witnessed a nation in shock and deep grief. In January, the mood had shifted. People were angry, focused on defeating the enemy and rebuilding. Amidst this anger, though, there was also a resilient spark of hope. This summer, however, I experienced an exhausted Israel, her people worn down by war, the economy in shambles. Everyone is consumed by those on the battlefield, held hostage, displaced from their homes, those who have been sexually assaulted, severely injured, and or recently killed. The wars caused division among Israelis. There's a sadness in just about everyone's eyes, a sadness that I was afraid meant that people were losing hope, the thing that sustains the Jewish state. Israel's national anthem is Hatikva, the hope. Without hope, I don't know how Israel can survive. So during this summer's trip, I found myself worried about Israel's future. When visiting Hostage Square in Tel Aviv back in June, I met a woman from Nir Oz, one of the kibbutzim devastated on October 7th. And she was selling bright yellow sunflowers in support of the hostages. Her eyes were so sad. And like many from the kibbutzim, she's very anti-Netanyahu. She's angry with the way Israel is running the war, the lack of attention being paid to the hostages. Of course, she's also enraged by Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis and Iran. She's frustrated with our government here in the United States. I asked her if she has hope for Israel and the Jewish people. And without any hesitation, her sad eyes looked into mine and said, yes, I have hope because of our youth. The way they've responded to this war, defending the nation, helping to lift the country, serving, volunteering. They're proof that Israel is strong. Our youth, she said, will lead us with strength into the future. And as she said this, her eyes brightened and she smiled. And she gave me hope. She turned me on to Israel's special sauce, the spark that keeps hope alive, the source of Israeli resilience, Israel's teens and young adults. While the pain of war makes it hard to see hope in Israel, the lady selling sunflowers opened my eyes to the efforts of young Israelis who, after October 7th, despite political turmoil that had been dividing the country prior to the attack, surprised many. They showed up in record numbers to fight and volunteer. Many of these young kids were not officially called to serve, but they did so proudly. Most lost family and friends on October 7th, and this pushed them to step forward. Even elementary and high school students have rolled up their sleeves to keep farms functioning and help families who have been reduced, who have been forced out of their homes in the north and in the south. On various Israeli military bases this year, I've met thousands of young soldiers going in and coming out of Gaza, flying up and back from Lebanon, putting their lives on the line for Israel and the Jewish people. And I tell them over and over again that they're real, live Jewish superheroes, but they don't agree. No, we're just doing our job, they always say, protecting our country. They're serving because they love Israel and consider it a responsibility to defend their home. And they know that Israel is it. They have no other home. They've been raised to appreciate this fact. And this is why, after October 7th, almost instantaneously, Israel watched as young heroes were born. On the battlefield like Ophek and Matan, and the home front, Israel's young people have stepped forward in incredible ways, and they continue to do so. They do this because ingrained in the Israeli spirit is the belief in something that is bigger than each of them. And that is Am Yisrael, the nation of Israel. Belief in a safe and secure Jewish state. A state that was built on the blood and the sweat and the tears of their parents and their grandparents and their great-grandparents and other Jews who knew just how important it was for Israel to exist and thrive. In Israel, you give your all to be part of ensuring that the Jewish nation continues. It's why, without batting an eye, but with lots of fear, Israeli parents send their children off to the IDF. It's why IDF soldiers will tell you as they head into battle, we're not superheroes. It's why tremendous numbers of Israeli kids have given of their time to volunteer to help their country during the war. Yes, there are many Israelis who are disillusioned by what they're living through. And can you blame them? The media wants us to believe that Israelis are fleeing the country in droves. Well, some have left for various reasons, not just the war. The vast majority of Israelis have stayed put and in their own ways have supported their nation. When it comes to politics and how the war is being handled, Israel is a democracy. A democracy made up of 7.3 million Jews. So there are a lot of different opinions about the war that are expressed, and often expressed very strongly. There are many who support the war and many who do not. There are those who support the current Israeli government and those who do not. There are many who have concerns but don't talk about them. And there's a large national protest movement directed at Netanyahu's right-wing government. This movement started long before October 7th and now includes those concerned with the war and the hostages. Yes, there is division in Israel. But if you've seen pictures of the protests in Tel Aviv and elsewhere, what do you see? Israeli flags, hundreds of them. Hatikva, Israel's national anthem, is sung at these protests. Yair Lapid, who served as Israel's prime minister in 2022, and some of us met him in June, he said before October 7th that the protests are, quote, a source of pride for everyone who loves Israel. They showcase the best of liberal democracy, active citizenship, and a loyalty to the country that stems not from a dark nationalism, but from a passionate patriotism. Organizations that protest the government support those whose loved ones are held hostage and those who have been forced from their homes. Ophir Guttelson, the founder of Unacceptable, a US-based Israeli protest group created by Israeli Americans, asks those who join his group's events to carry Israeli flags and posters expressing support for Israel to distinguish themselves from the many anti-Israel protesters who seek Israel's demise. Unacceptable protests are not anti-Israel. They're not pro-Hamas or pro-Hezbollah like we see in the US and elsewhere. They're attempts by patriotic Israelis to strengthen a country that is bigger than them. And there are young Israelis who are becoming heroes of this protest movement, raising their voices to help define the future of Israel. Interestingly, whether fighting in Gaza or Lebanon, caring for displaced children in a Jerusalem hotel, or standing up for what they see as best for their country at a protest, Israel's emerging young heroes are all driven by the same thing: a deep desire to put everything on the line, including for so many of them, their lives, to protect the country that means the world to them. The couple who helped the old woman at 613 Betzalel Street, they too were driven by a desire to protect their country. While their simple act of kindness can't compare to what the IDF soldiers do in battle, or even the work done by those volunteering for the home front or those organizing protests, the simple act of the couple strengthened Israeli society. And let's not forget, that couple, they probably served in the IDF themselves. And they have friends in battle. And I bet you they've volunteered for the home front. I also bet they have friends who protest regularly. And sadly, I'm sure that they've lost people they've loved this year. Israel's young people live lives of service and sacrifice, and this is why the couple helped the old woman. Every year we have Israeli teens who visit Broward County on their gap year. And before they serve in the IDF, they come and meet with our teens. And whenever our teens, our RSBI kids, meet these teens, they can't get their heads around the fact that Israelis embrace their obligation to serve in the IDF. And when our kids ask them why, the Israeli teens always say the same thing: it's what we do. We give to Israel to make it stronger. And our kids, they just don't get it. You see, we raise our children very differently here. Most of our kids perform community service, but it's often connected to a school requirement, an upcoming bar bat mitzvah, or building a college resume. A few go above and beyond, but the majority of American kids are focused on school, succeeding in sports and other extracurricular activities, getting into a good college, finding a career path, graduating, maybe heading off to graduate school and starting a career. There is no societal requirement for our kids to think beyond themselves, to help tip the scales here in America. Given this, it is no surprise that patriotism among Gen Zers, those born between 1997 and 2012, the next generation of American leaders, patriotism has plummeted to a record low. Now, there are a lot of Gen Zers out there, folks in this sanctuary who care passionately about this country and are making a difference. But we're in desperate need of more of them. And to those of you Gen Zers who get it, we need you to speak with your peers. And let me point out that I, and many of you, we are parents of Gen Zers. We raised them. We pushed them in the direction they're going, and we played a role in shaping their world. Now, here's some good news. The majority of young Americans agree that a civil service career is an opportunity to improve society. But here's the bad news. An even larger majority have never considered pursuing a civil service job. And when it comes to military service, it should be no surprise that the vast majority of kids today are not interested in serving. This is why the U.S. military failed to recruit enough service members last year. And this is something that Israelis just can't wrap their heads around. The fact is, most American young people don't see themselves as part of something bigger than them, part of a country that needs them. And this is on all of us, and it affects all of us. Just look at college campuses and city streets today. Protests are part of American life and should be allowed on campuses and public spaces. However, not the outrageous protests we're seeing today. Protests often driven by young people, protests that stand in stark contrast to most of what we're seeing in Israel. The hate that we're watching on some of our campuses and in our streets, hate that includes not just attacking Israel, but Jewish students, the homes and businesses of American Jews, waving the flags of terror organizations, burning Israeli and United States flags, shouting death to America and to Israel, vandalizing property. To me, this flies in the face of what I've always thought of as American values. All of this, as our nation is embroiled in a toxic election process, one in which these values have been tossed completely out the window. It's no wonder that patriotism has tanked, not just for Gen Zers, but for the majority of Americans. Most of us are not out there waving our flags on a good day, and if we bother to protest, we're certainly not bringing our American flags. So many of us are angry. We're focused not on the United States of America. We're entrenched in the politics of the party we belong to and the candidate promoted by our party and turned into a celebrity. Civil discourse is dead, and we intentionally separate ourselves from those on the other side. The societal scales in America are so completely out of whack, and in this unbalanced country, it should be of no surprise that Gallup's Resilience Index ranks the United States of America well below the global average when it comes to our society's resilience. We're a fragile nation, desperately in need of a resiliency boost, one that won't come from just eating pomegranates at our breakfast. Now, I know that many of us stay awake at night worrying about Israel. It's not just Hillary and Danette and I. But despite all that's going on in the Jewish state, I know that Israel has a bright future because I've seen Israel's young people in action. I'm worried about things here in the United States of America, and I stay awake worrying about our great nation too, and our emerging leaders, our young people, our kids. In our Torah reading, the high priest sacrificed for his well-being, the well-being of his family, and the well-being of the entire community. Israeli young people do this on a regular basis, and they are tipping the scales in the right direction. But not enough of our young people, not enough of us do this. Our scales are moving in the wrong direction here and are stripping us of hope and resiliency. Cheryl, Abigail, and I went back to the old lady's gate the day after the young couple helped her. Around the same time, she was waiting patiently for them to arrive, because we thought maybe she'd be there and we could help her. We found what we thought was her gate, but the 613 address sign was gone. there wasn't even a nail in the place where it was hanging. We looked up the stairs, absolutely no sign of the lady. So maybe we thought we were at the wrong gate. So we asked a local resident where 613 Betzalel was, and the resident looked confused and said, there is no 613 Betzalel. These houses are all 20-something or 30-something Betzalel Street. Now, I guarantee you, we did not imagine the 613 number sign. It was real. It was gone, but it was real. We do have a picture, that's right. But given what the resident told us, the address 613 made no sense. Unless, of course, we look at it spiritually. You see, the old lady had fulfilled her task. She saw that it was all right in Israel. The young people there understood that they're part of something bigger than themselves. She saw a resilient people, and she packed up, and she moved on to where she's needed. I'm thinking she's here in America. And somewhere, she's set up a home. She's hung her 613 sign outside, maybe 613 West Broward Boulevard. Who knows? But you see, I truly believe she's out there. And I can't help but think she's asking as she looks at our country, I wonder what's gone wrong. I want all of us, especially our young adults, our future, to believe, as crazy as it sounds, to believe that she is out there and she is waiting. And we need to show her, like our Israeli brothers and sisters, that we too are all right. But my friends, we have a lot of work to do. If your kids aren't here, tell them, please, about the old lady. We all need to be on the lookout for her because she needs someone to help her, hopefully a young person who realizes that there's something bigger than us out there. Might the old lady be Moshiach, the Redeemer of not just Jewish people, but the entire world? Who knows? But I do know that by getting us all, especially America's younger generations, searching for her everywhere, committed to helping her, we just might be able to make everything all right, to redeem our great nation by lifting that old lady higher and in turn lifting ourselves and our country higher, tipping the scales in the right direction, bringing hope and resiliency back into our lives. And let me add, I also believe that this old lady is an Israeli Jew, and she's also waiting for us American Jews, no matter our age, to wake the heck up and realize that the something bigger than us must include Israel. And when the Jewish state and the United States become that bigger something, those of us who have stayed awake worrying will get some much needed rest.